Welcome to the Empire Mine State Historic Park, site of one of the most historic gold mining operations in California. In the early days of the California Gold Rush, there were two principal gold mining methods: placer mining and hard rock mining. Placer mining is a gold recovery method where water is used to separate loose gold from surrounding sediment. A well-known type of placer mining would be panning for gold. At the beginning of the gold rush, men were crouched down next to a flowing creek and were using water swirling in a gold pan to wash away dirt, small rocks, and other debris from any pieces of gold that may also be present. Hard rock mining is a mining method where shafts are sunk deep into the earth following veins of gold embedded in hard rock, and where explosives are used to break the rock containing the gold into pieces. Hard rock mining evolved to be the principal method of gold recovery as the California Gold Rush matured. The Empire Mine was a hard rock mine. The Empire's gold was primarily embedded in quartz ore, and the quartz ore was embedded in solid granite. Shafts were sunk thousands of feet down into the earth. Explosives were used to blast the gold-bearing rock into pieces that were then brought to the surface to be pulverized and treated with heat and chemicals to separate the gold from the host rock. The origin of the Empire Mine dates back to 1850, when a man named George D. Roberts found gold in the vicinity of what is now the park's visitor center parking lot. Roberts staked a claim and began to dig into the surface of the earth. He called his claim the Ophir Hill Mine. Roberts sold his Ophir Hill claim a year later. In the next few years, the Ophir Hill Mine changed ownership again a number of times, becoming known as the Empire Mine. Eventually, it was consolidated along with other nearby mines into a mining complex known today as the Empire Mines. Over the years, the mining complex expanded, and in 1866 a new shaft, the one now visited in the mine yard, was sunk south and parallel to the original Ophir Hill mine shaft. This shaft is now known as the Empire Shaft and provides entry into the underground workings of the Empire Mines. It is not known what happened to Roberts' original Ophir Hill mine shaft. In 1869, San Francisco businessman William Bowers Bourne acquired the principal ownership of the Empire Mine. Bourne was not a miner or a prospector. He came to California as part of the gold rush, but he was a merchant. He was part owner of a shipping company bringing goods from the East Coast to California. Over the years, acquiring wealth and discretionary income, Bourne invested in and got the controlling interest of the Empire Mine. This started the almost continuous 60-year history of the Bourne family owning the mine. Unfortunately, Bourne died 5 years later, leaving behind his wife Sarah and 5 children in San Francisco. One of those children was William Bourne II. He was only 17 when his father passed, and his mother wanted him to continue his education. He enrolled in the University of Cambridge in Cambridge, England. While Bourne was at college in England, the mine manager believed the Empire Mine had run out of gold. Trying to find more gold, he commenced sinking a new mine shaft on a parallel gold vein, known as the Rich Hill Ledge. This shaft was known as the New Rich Hill Mine Shaft, and this mine shaft portal is present today, located just outside the visitor center. Success, though, was limited. Sarah called her son home from England to assume control of the business enterprises and to make the decisions regarding the future of the Empire Mine. Bourne returned from England in late 1878 and did not believe the Empire to be barren. The Empire pumps were re-energized and the shaft deepening continued. Bourne was right. Gold was once again being extracted from the Empire's main shaft. This started the almost continual 50-year history of William Bourne II being the principal owner of the Empire Mine. During the period 1866 to 1914, the main shaft was sunk with passageways, called drifts, extending outwards from each side of the shaft following the quartz gold vein. Rails were laid in the main shaft for the man skips, the rolling cars the miners rode on to get into the mine, and the ore cars that carried the ore to the surface. The manskips for the miners traveled around 600 feet a minute, about 7 miles an hour, and were controlled by the hoist operator in his building east of the mine shaft. By 1914, the main shaft had reached an incline depth of 4,600 linear feet. At that time, a second parallel shaft was started 1/2 mile to the north and began at the same depth as the bottom of the main shaft. This second shaft extended down another 3,400 inclined feet, reaching to the deepest point in the Empire mine, about 4,000 vertical feet below the surface. In the early years, the primary gold recovery method was the mercury-gold amalgamation process. The quartz ore from deep in the earth was brought up from the mine in ore cars on rails and up what was called the head frame, where the cars were tipped over and the ore spilled into crushers. The Empire Mine's head frame was located at the Empire Mine shaft portal at the end of the large building housing the machine shop, carpenter shop, and electric shop. The head frame stood about 94 feet tall. The hoists were located in the hoist house, located at the east end of the mine yard. Originally, the hoists were steam-powered. In the mid-1880s, water power became the primary energy source for the machinery and operations at the mine, followed by electricity in the early 1900s. The quartz ore containing the gold coming out of the crushers was reduced to about the size of a walnut. This smaller size ore was then taken to the stamp mill to be pulverized to a fine, sand-like consistency by the batteries of stamps. In 1900, there were 40 stamps in the Empire Mill building, each weighing about 850 pounds, with a stamping rate of around 100 times a minute. At the peak of the Empire's ore stamping operation, there were 80 stamps in this building, each weighing 1,780 pounds and dropping at 104 times a minute. The pulverized ore from under the stamps washed out on a table located in front of the battery of stamps. These tables were covered with copper plates. A thin layer of liquid mercury was applied to the copper plates. As the wet slurry of crushed ore flowed over the mercury-covered copper plates, the gold stuck to the mercury, forming a mercury-gold amalgamation. When the table was full, the stamps were stopped and the amalgamation was scraped into a bucket to be taken to the refinery where heat was used to separate the gold from the mercury. The mercury-gold amalgamation was taken to the refinery where it was put into the retort oven. The retort was a closed system consisting of an oven box and a chimney connected to a water-cooled pipe. The amalgam was placed into the oven and heated to a high temperature, causing the mercury to boil off as a vapor. The vapor traveled up the chimney into the water-cooled pipe where it recondensed as a liquid, drained into a bucket, and was then taken back to the mill to be used again. The gold remaining in the oven was then put in another furnace and heated to a molten state where it could be poured into molds to make the gold bars. Over the years, other gold recovery methods were employed as the gold recovery processes improved with technology. But the mercury-gold amalgamation process was the most efficient in the early years of gold mining. Adjacent to and around the corner from the mine yard is the estate area of William Bourne II's vacation or summer home. Standing just outside the visitor center, looking into the 13-acre landscape grounds visible are Bourne's Empire Cottage summer home, the clubhouse, the foundation remains of Ophir Cottage, the residence of mine manager George Starr from 1917 to 1935, and the O Young House, residence of the Chinese O Young family that worked for George Starr and were caretakers and maintenance for the clubhouse. Bourne, now 40 years old and living at his primary residence in San Francisco, decided he would like to have a summer home on the Empire Mine property in Grass Valley. He contracted with well-known San Francisco architect Willis Polk to build a residence that would offer rest and relaxation for the Bournes and their family and friends. Construction of the cottage began in 1897. The granite on the walls came from the depths of the Empire Mine. Upstairs across the front of the building were 4 bedrooms, a large bedroom with a fireplace at each end of the building, 2 smaller bedrooms in the center of the building, and 2 Jack and Jill bathrooms connecting the large bedrooms to the adjacent smaller bedrooms. Upstairs at the rear of the building were 3 small bedrooms and a shared bath for the staff. Entering the front door on the ground floor, one stepped into the cottage living room. Clearheart redwood boards paneled the walls and ceiling. Across the living room was a large staircase that ascended to the residents' bedroom area. To one side of the living room is the dining room. Flanking the dining room outside is a screened porch. At the other side of the living room, there was initially also a screened porch, but around 1900, Bourne had that porch converted to a study for himself. A large fireplace is in the living room, another large fireplace is in the dining room, and these, along with the 2 upstairs bedroom fireplaces and wood stove in the kitchen, were originally the only source of heat for the building. The table and chairs, the buffet along the wall, and the rocking chair in the dining room are all original to the Bournes. The other furnishings in the living spaces are reproductions or period pieces obtained by the state to furnish the building to the 1905 era. Moving from the living room through the doorway to the kitchen stands the staff staircase. While the family staircase was wide and ornate with a black lustrous finish, the staff staircase was narrow, steep, and plain wood. A distinct difference is noted contrasting the finishings and appearances of the residence area to the staff area. Different plain wood boards cover the walls and ceiling. The floor is very basic. Gone are the ornate light fixtures. In 1900, Bourne hired Katie Moriarty, a mid-30s Irish woman, to be his full-time housekeeper at the cottage. The kitchen and staff area at the rear of the house were Katie's domain. Her bedroom was one of the 3 small bedrooms upstairs at the rear of the house. Katie served as the housekeeper in the cottage until 1934. Bourne added an addition at the rear of the house, providing Katie with her own parlor and dining area. Next to the kitchen is the prep room or larder, where the food was prepared for cooking and where the icebox sat. The wood stove in the kitchen is a Cribben and Sexton universal wood-burning, coal-burning stove. This stove was placed in the cottage at the time of construction and probably has sat in this spot since 1898. The source of the stove is unknown. However, historic photos of the inside of a local Grass Valley hardware store from that time shows very similar looking stoves on its showroom floor. Across from the kitchen is the butler's pantry, the area where the tableware and linens were stored, and the meal servings staged for serving to the residents. When the cottage was built in 1897, electricity was included. The electricity was carried by poles and wires to the cottage from the mine yard, as it had received electricity from the Nevada County Power and Electric Company starting in 1896. The water supply for the cottage was water carried from a reservoir above Grass Valley in a large pipe to the mine to power the water wheels in the mine yard. The water was carried further to the cottage through smaller pipes. Bourne suffered a series of strokes starting in August of 1921. He was confined to a wheelchair after the first stroke. No longer being able to use the stairs to get to his upstairs bedroom, Bourne had his study converted to a bedroom, and a bathroom was added on to the rear of the cottage. In late 1922, Bourne suffered another stroke. He no longer came to the mine or cottage after this second stroke. In 1929, Bourne, being in poor health from his strokes, his wife Agnes suffering ill health as well, and with the death of their daughter Maud from pneumonia that same year, decided to sell the Empire mines to the Newmont Mining Company. However, he held on to the estate area and cottage until 1933, when he then also sold the estate buildings, including the cottage, to Newmont. Newmont then put its own mine managers in the cottage as residents. The cottage was occupied up to around 1960. After completing construction of the cottage, Bourne decided to also build a recreation facility he called the clubhouse. Engaging Willis Polk again, the clubhouse served two purposes. First, 3 small bedrooms and a shared bath were positioned on the top floor for visitors. The rest of the building was dedicated to sports and recreation activities for the benefit of Bourne and his family, his senior mine management personnel and their families, and favored community friends and acquaintances. On the lowest level was a squash court and a bowling alley. On the main floor above was a billiard room and a large room for dances, parties, and other similar large group activities. Out front was a tennis court. To one side was a flat grass area for badminton and croquet. There are 4 trophy game animal heads on the walls in the main room. These animal heads, 2 elk and 2 moose, are not native to the Grass Valley area. A local newspaper article reported in May 1905 that 3 of the trophy heads had arrived for installation in the clubhouse. There is no documentation identifying the origin of these heads, nor the individual who may have shot them. We don't know where they came from, but they've been hanging on the walls since 1905. In 1915, 2 local Grass Valley residents and friends of the Empire Mine manager's wife, Libby Starr, suggested forming a social country club and asked Mrs. Starr if the club could meet in the clubhouse. Gaining her husband's approval and also being elected the first president of this new Empire Country Club, the club began holding meetings and parties in the clubhouse. A fun-loving group, the club met in the clubhouse for years and is still in existence today. The Starrs were members of the club. The Bournes apparently were never members of the Empire Country Club. Slightly uphill from the clubhouse is Ophir Cottage, the residence of George and Libby Starr. George Starr was William Bourne II's cousin. He was 5 years younger than Bourne. He became an orphan at age 11 and a ward of his Aunt Sarah, Bourne's mother. At a young age, George Starr developed an interest in gold mining and, after graduating from high school, decided he wanted to become a mining engineer. Starr asked his cousin William for a job at the Empire. Bourne agreed and started him as a mucker, the worker who shoveled the ore into the ore car. Within a few years, noting Starr's hard work, self-study of gold mining principles, and asking gold mining-related questions of the Cornish miners, Bourne promoted Starr upwards from mucker to more responsibility. In 1887, satisfied with Starr's progress and work ethic, Bourne made him the superintendent of the Empire Mine. Starr was well liked by the miners and the community. He also married a local girl, Libby Black Crocker, the stepdaughter of a local blacksmith. This endeared him to the community all the more. Starr and his wife initially lived in a bungalow-style house located on the edge of the mine yard, close to where the visitor center sits now. In 1916, Starr decided he would like to have a nicer house higher up in the estate area, further away from the noise of the mine. This house, completed in early 1917, was a 2-story wood-siding building much larger than his bungalow-style house. Starr called his new house Ophir Cottage. The Starrs lived there until 1935 when, unfortunately, the house burned down. The foundation of that house remains and is visible just uphill from the tennis courts. George Starr was the manager of the Empire Mine almost continuously from 1887 to 1929. When Bourne sold the Empire Mine to Newmont, Starr retired as mine manager, but remained on as a consultant. When Ophir Cottage burned down, he and his wife Libby relocated to San Francisco, where they spent their final years. After selling the mine in 1929 and the Empire Estate in 1933 to Newmont, Bourne and his wife Agnes lived out their lives at their estate called Filoli in Woodside, California, down the peninsula from San Francisco. Bourne and his wife Agnes both died in 1936 and are interred on their Filoli estate. Downhill from the clubhouse on the service road leading to the mine yard is the former residence of the Ouyang family, the three-generation Chinese family who provided cooking, gardening, and maintenance services. In the early 1900s, George Starr hired patriarch Fu Sing Ouyang to be his cook and gardener. Fu Sing was from Canton, China. Within a few years, Fu Sing was able to send for his wife Gum Ming and young son Ming, who later adopted the name George, to travel from China to join him at the empire. Fu Sing built the small house still visible today along the service road around 1915. A few years later, Fu Sing retired, and son George assumed the gardening responsibilities and also became the caretaker for the clubhouse. George married Hong Kong resident Cho Mu Choi, who changed her name to Susie after the marriage in 1927. George and Susie had 7 children, and they all, along with George's mother Gum Ming, lived in this Ouyang house. Besides working at the estate, the Ouyang family also grew vegetables and raised chickens behind the house. On the occasion of the Starr's Ophir cottage burning down, a small piece of that house was saved and attached to the Ouyang house. It is visible today with a different appearance and is located on the southeast corner of the Ouyang house. George was once asked if living so close to the mine yard resulted in a lot of noise and vibration coming from the stamp mill. George says they got used to the noise and they never felt any vibration from the stamp mill. The family continued to live in this house until the early 1970s, when George Ouyang built another house for the family directly across the road from the mine. Newmont, shortly after assuming ownership of the empire in 1929, also acquired the nearby North Star mines, a large mining operation comparable to the Empire mines. Newmont incorporated the 2 large mining operations into the Empire Star mines. Over the years, Newmont expanded its operations, increasing the Empire Star Mines operating area to about 5 square miles of underground works. Mining continued up until 1956 when Newmont, faced with increased mining and labor cost and suffering from a federal government-imposed $35 an ounce fixed price of gold, determined it was costing more to recover the gold than they could sell it for to the government. Newmont closed the Empire Star Mines in 1956. In the 106-year history of mining operations, the Empire Mines and the North Star Mines, initially operating separately and then combined in 1929 to become the Empire Star Mines, produced 5.8 million troy ounces of gold. The Empire Mines produced around 3 million ounces, with the North Star Mines producing a similar amount. The Empire Star's 5 square mile operating area extends under the town of Grass Valley and surrounding area. There are over 367 miles of shafts and passageways extending down thousands of feet into the earth. The deepest vertical depth in the Empire Star complex is in the North Star mine at just under 1 vertical mile deep. Newmont still owns the mineral rights under the park. A common question is, will the mine ever reopen? The answer is, we don't know.